Welcome to How to Lead DBAs to Embrace DevOps Rather Than Fearing Change. My name is Kendra Little, and I am an evangelist at Redgate Software. Redgate is a company that offers just amazing stuff to the SQL Server community, to the data platform community, and I'm so proud to now be a part of Redgate. We've got lots of opportunities to learn for free online, from articles at Simple Talk to the new Redgate University that will help you learn about how to use Redgate products and how to do big picture things like use source control for your code, use monitoring. We've also got SQL Server Central in the family, which I'm just so proud to be associated with this organization now. And one of the things that we do is these free webcasts. So let's go on and dive in. What we are talking about today is the biggest the biggest issues in a DBA's world, but through the lens of how do we help evolve database engineers in a way that can be really productive and part of a rich DevOps team that delivers value to customers quickly and continuously. And what I am looking at today is insights from a webcast that I was lucky enough to get to be a part of recently. We had a panel discussion on the biggest issues in a DBA's world, and I was on that panel with Hamish Watson as well as William Durkin, and we discussed what is really hard and what are the opportunities for database engineers right now. And what I want to do is take 3 key insights from that discussion and bring them out from the perspective of how do we help database administrators embrace DevOps. And the first thing is that embracing DevOps requires a real shift in perspective for not just database administrators, but for everyone who's used to working in IT. I think it can be particularly hard for database administrators, but it is also, if you're a SAN engineer, if you're a network administrator, there's going to be a similar shift in perspective. Another insight is in terms of motivation. Deployment pain is a real issue for DBAs. The difficulty and the long hours and interrupted sleep associated with deploying changes. The promise of finding a way to eliminate that pain can be a big motivating factor. But also the third point is that we really need to change how we measure success. We need to change what we judge DBAs on, and we need to change what we judge software developers on, what we judge SAN administrators on. We need to change a lot of the ways that we measure success in order to actually have these changes come to pass and to be able to do things like reduce this deployment pain. So let's go ahead and dive in first to this shift in perspective that is needed. One interesting question in terms of your IT staff, in terms of your DBAs, I would ask them a couple of questions. Before, trying to convince them of a change to DevOps, I would find out a few things about how they see things now. What do they see their role is now? How would they describe what the value they provide is? Do they see themselves as a kind of protector of data or a form of a safeguard, or is it something else? I think it's very interesting before you're asking someone to change the way they work with others and to motivate them to really embrace DevOps, you want to find out where they are. I would also ask them what I think is a really critical question is, who do you think is your customer? And for this one, when asking the question, I wouldn't even provide sample values. I would just ask, who do you see as your customer? Now, when I started as a database administrator, I learned who my customer was from my CTO. The CTO of our group, and he was just 2 job positions away from me. It wasn't a very deep hierarchy. I learned a lot from him, and he saw our customers as the other business units. They were internal customers that we served. And I worked in everything from build operations to databases from him. That view needs to dramatically shift when we start doing DevOps and when we start transforming our companies. And it's one of the things that is interesting to know before you start thinking about this. Who do they see their customers as now? So to get a little more insight on this perspective, I'm going to play a clip from the webcast, and let's listen in our discussion about how IT is shifting. IT is shifting to this application-centric approach. Let's hear a take from Hamish and then a little bit of commentary from me on this point.
I love the statement. The reason why I love the statement is it's getting people, right? So your traditional DBA who loves a bit of table, loves rows and columns, it drives them. That's what they go to work to do. They muck about with data, right? But it ain't about data. Data doesn't make a business profitable. It makes it run. And the thing is that for years, application developers have been embracing things like continuous delivery, right? So delivering value to the end user as quick as being able to react, adapt quicker than the competition to deliver business value. And in fact, if I was writing the article you took this from, James, I would say IT is shifting to a business-centric approach, delivering business value. DBAs need to expand what they do. They need to see that they are not just a little cog in the machine. They're a vital part of the machine. Like the machine is delivering value to clients because clients pay us for what we deliver. And if DBAs, in fact, any data professional can see that it's more about, in this case, application-centric, but in fact, business-centric approach. So it's going full noise.
Can you take it even farther and say that it is shifting to a customer-centric approach? Or I'm actually curious, like where do we stop? Because our goal is to get things like literally out to the customer and to delight them, or at least help them get their job done.
Kendra, that's so awesome. And be careful, we might almost say the word agile in this session.
I love that clip. So I think Hamish made a really, really powerful point there. And there's really two parts to this point. There's the transformation of changing the view of who your customer is. But then this is part of elevating the role of the database administrator as well and making them see that so the former view of this, or the view that DBAs have grown up in for a long time, is that DBAs are a worker within this silo of IT engineers, and they have internal customers. They serve internal requests. And this is what Hamish was talking about when he was talking about being sort of a cog in a structure. In a bureaucratic IT silo where we have these internal customers, we fulfill requests. We are part of this cost center, and our value is really to fulfill requests from other people. Now that is changing when everyone is focused on the end users. When we move to a position where we're in this cross-functional team, and our whole goal under DevOps is to automate as much as we can and deliver value to our end users more quickly, and we're all focusing on those end users, we're doing some similar things to what we do, right? In the bureaucratic structure, the DBA is responsible for their documentation and maintenance and deployment. But in the DevOps world, we can automate these things more fully because it's not just us who has to figure out, oh, how do I automate this myself? Instead of index maintenance being only the role of a database administrator, for example, that problem of how to do it, if they are working on a cross-functional team with software developers, hey, maybe there's some points of this where tuning should be part of the application itself, and maintenance shouldn't just be inside this one domain. They can work together to solve problems and create automation with tools that aren't just the typical tools that people inside that DBA team can make. So there's a lot of, in the DevOps world, the goal of the DBA isn't that they go away. The goal is that they become a database specialist who has fewer manual tasks to do, who can help design architecture, help design changes, help deliver value to the customer more quickly. And I think this is a much more interesting and a much more rich job for people to take on. Now, the last bullet on here is interesting. I have on here, the last bullet is that they share responsibility for production stability with that entire team. And we are going to talk more about that because that is also a dramatic change in IT. Where to start here? I would start with that, asking these two questions. What do you see as your role? And who do you see as your customer? And listen to the feedback, collect that from the entire team, and then start talking about that and start talking about what happens if your role shifts and what happens when your view of the customer is now the end user. How does that change things? This change can be really, really powerful, but just changing your view of this by itself is not going to change everything, right? This is one part. This is just one of the three insights that we are talking about. We also need to talk a little bit about motivation, because just changing who we view as our customer isn't necessarily going to fix all our motivation. Now, one thing that can be very motivating to people in IT is reducing the parts of their job that are painful. And the great pain that comes out of deploying changes to production is something that a lot of DBAs bond over. People in IT often bond over deployment pain because deploying changes hurts. What's often the case in changes in the change pattern is that changes come over from a development team or even from an outside vendor. It is left to DBAs and IT staff to review these changes, and then often it is the IT staff who represents the change, which they have tried to review, but is often a massive amount of code that they get to represent this change at a change approval board, which is awkward because how much have you been able to test this code? But the DBA often, and just the IT person, this also happens to application engineers as well, they are held responsible for the quality of this change, which generally they didn't write. And these changes often break. The deployment scripts themselves often do not execute successfully because there's been some schema drift between the production environment and the environments it was tested with. Also, undoing these changes. If something goes wrong after deployment, undoing them, there's generally no rollback script given, and simply reverting the database to an earlier point in time is often going to impact far more users than the ones negatively impacted by the change. So there is a ton of pain when it comes to deploying software. Now let's listen to another clip about how changing this can motivate workers and where there may be some problems, why it's going to be harder to transform some teams than others.
Rob Sills asked the question, I think it's a good one, isn't the most important question why? Why is it shifting? I would presume that's what you mean, Rob.
And then
why is it shifting?
Well, it is a good question because I think we all had a moment where we're thinking. Thinking is a good thing. That's it. So it's an interesting question. So this change it really is. So it's a cultural change when it happens inside of companies, but it's also a cultural thing in terms of how it spreads between companies. And I think part of it is wanting to get better at building tools, because part of the change also involves not just planning something well in advance and maybe you do some customer research, but like figuring out, hey, we're going to do this big thing and here's how it all works, and then executing on it. Because what we've learned with a lot of technology is if you do that, when you get to the end of what you plan to deliver, sometimes it's not actually what your customers want. So part of the cultural change is learning how to deliver this value to the customer and get feedback and incorporate the voice of the customer more into your product. I think part of it is also just to having worked in the environment where you deploy things all at once after planning all this time. It's really hard on your people to do these weekend deployments and then have to recover from all of the issues that your massive code release introduced. It's not an easy lifestyle within the company too. So I think there's productivity reasons, but then also company culture reasons to do it as well. And I'm sure there's even more too. But yeah, I would love to hear you guys' take on this. I think it's a great question.
Well, I'm not sure that too many companies are that bothered about the cultural impact on the employees. Maybe I'm just being devil's advocate here. They don't care. They want to release products to their clients faster and faster. And that just means make everything work well in the background. However you do that. If they have 200 people working 24/7, that doesn't matter as long as the clients are getting their stuff, right? It's not going to necessarily be a focus on, is everybody okay with this workload?
So someone should care about it for financial reasons. I saw an estimate recently that in terms of employee turnover, the cost of hiring a new skilled employee is somewhere around 20% of their salary. And so how you can retain your employees is important, and I think this goes into that, we want to keep our people who know all this stuff about our business as well as their technical skills. But I agree that there are a lot of companies that miss that, which I think is a failing in terms of...
Sure. I'm by no means defending that approach at all, no. But I think mostly it's going to be the thing of the expectation of the market is my iPhone app is there. I get the update, it's there. And I'm not waiting. I don't care about your excuses of we've got to do rollouts, we've got to do QA. I want my app now. And it's pushing more and more into the enterprise IT. That the same thing is expected of internal IT and internal software as well, that they just expect it to always be up to date or not to wait half a year for some monolithic release. They just don't care. No, next week I want my shiny button in the right corner. It's only a button, make it happen.
And you can do that without having disengaged employees. Like one of the cool things about, automating and innovating and, using DevOps is you can cut time in lieu. Because I used to have people who were the deploy, we still delivered to the client, but I lost half my team because they were sleeping during the day because they'd been up all night. We still delivered. Were my team happy? No. Was I happy? No. And that's where taking an application-centric approach is vital to going against that stereotype. And a cultural shift, companies have to do that or else those 200 people are not happy. And the company will eventually not deliver. It will, I'm sad to hear that. I want to come over and help those companies.
That I think William is so right when he mentions that some companies don't think about the state or the health of the workforce during these deployments. And those are the cultures that are going to be harder to transform. I think Hamish is absolutely right that you're going to get more value from a culture where you don't have release pain, where changes can flow out and your customers can see new features and take advantage of them without your staff having to actually suffer, lose sleep, and be fixing things nonstop after these releases. Disempowered workers, like the ones in the cultures that William was describing, who feel that their health doesn't matter to their employer, if you try to quickly shift these workers into, hey, we're going to automate everything, they are going to believe that their job is going to go away because that they are used to feeling unimportant and disempowered. So you do need to address that as well if you are presently in that kind of culture, and you need to think about how do we motivate folks, because the motivation should be to get to provide more value, not to automate yourself out of a job, because there's still going to be plenty work for database people in a DevOps world. the higher the rate that you are deploying changes. In a world without deployment pain, you still have to have a ton of expertise in figuring out how do we deploy these things and automate the release cycle and continuously improve it. Because if we aren't careful about that, suddenly we're going to start making our customers really unhappy. So finding out what is the state of, how much do you fear doing a deployment? It's a really simple question, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I don't fear it to 10 is I fear it. How much do you fear when you release a change, or how much do you worry about that? This is a recommendation that the authors of the book Accelerate, a great DevOps book, recommend asking folks. And Gene Kim did a recent webinar with us where he talks about that. I'll be talking more about that in a future webcast, along with ways to measure employee satisfaction. One way to measure that is eNPS. And essentially, you're asking your employees, how much would you recommend working here to a friend or family member? Baselining that before you start changing your team around, or if you've already started changing your team around, starting to do it and measuring it regularly can help you figure out how successful you are being at making that change towards DevOps and how well it is going, because you should be seeing lower deployment pain as well as greater employee ability to recommend the company to others if you are making positive progress on the DevOps journey. What does success look like, and how do we measure database administrators' success in a DevOps world? This is a really important question. And traditionally, in a more bureaucratic IT style structure, a non-DevOps structure, we have a silo with devs and a silo with DBAs. And let's listen in to one final clip. This one is a pretty short one on measuring value when it comes to a DevOps world.
My advice is, communicate and collaborate, because you can learn T-SQL. You can spend enough time learning the ins and outs of T-SQL to become, a pretty competent DBA. But getting the collaboration side and culture, the whole thing about the part you play in delivering business value, you can meet those challenges, but don't meet them alone. Don't be just siloing yourself. Work with people. And again, if you take that step, like I went and sat with a dev team. I used to spend 1 day a week there. It was horrid for them and horrid for me, because I didn't understand what they were doing, and the whole Scrum thing, and stand up, it was weird initially. But once I understood, here's the thing, changes that they were doing, I learned early on in the piece when they were at the design phase by interacting with them. It meant that I didn't find them out at 4:30 on a Friday when I was given a change request ticket or whatever saying, hey, press F5 and prod. Mm-hmm. I helped them work out the difference between int and big int.
Now you might be wondering, okay, how do I measure people on collaboration and communication, right? Like, that's a great idea, but how do I measure it? Well, you don't measure the collaboration directly necessarily, but there is definitely a way that we are used to measuring our IT staff and our developer staff that has to change in order to really motivate your staff properly to do DevOps. So when I grew up through the ranks of an IT culture, database administrators, as well as everyone else in IT, was really, really judged on measuring production stability, right? We need to make sure that our environment is available, that it performs for our customers, and that we do not cause outages. So this is part of why the IT staff are responsible for deploying changes and the quality of those changes, even when they didn't write the code in the changes, but also for things like firewall changes or configuration changes or other changes. So the traditional way to do this is to judge IT based on stability, and then to judge developers based on release frequency and release tempo. Developers are judged on getting new features out to the customer. And what happens when we measure IT on stability and developers on release tempo is it's called the wall of confusion. This is a reference to the Accelerate book as well, where developers are trying to throw changes over this wall. And there's a real wall because they have competing interests. So developers are throwing changes over the wall and the IT staff are resisting them. And why shouldn't they resist them if they are being judged by stability? Having these two measurements actively inhibits collaboration and communication because we are measuring people in a way that doesn't work with DevOps. Now, a very powerful example of how to change this was given in a podcast episode. This is a Forrester podcast episode by Cyril Lamblard from Nespresso was speaking, and he is the head of e-commerce at Nespresso. Now, Nespresso is a company that has a lot of physical stores. They sell their product both online and in the physical stores. And he said, one thing that we have done, we found it very necessary to bring everyone together to have a shared goal. Because if we have the people in the physical stores just trying to optimize so they could sell more, and if we have the people in e-commerce optimizing so they could sell more, if we have these parts of the company competing against one another, they are not actually working in the best interest of the customer themselves. What the customer wants is a seamless experience. They want the same discount they see in the store to be available online. They want to be able to do cool things in both environments when they choose to do them. So we need to work together. And he said, my incentives on sales is not on e-commerce. Even though I am the head of e-commerce, I have global incentives on global sales. We have set up our incentives so that we have the same goals and are not competing with one another and trying to optimize different things. And that is, in terms of measurement, what we need to do. For DBAs leading them into a DevOps world, we need to measure our DBAs based on not only production stability, but also release frequency. And same thing for developers. Developers need to be just as responsible for production stability as they are for release frequency. And aligning these things and saying, these are our shared goals, we are part of the same team, is really going to help make the first two insights on this list happen, because what we are rewarded on really, really aligns with our day-to-day behaviors, or we align our day-to-day behaviors based on what we are measured on and what we are rewarded on. So I very much, that panel, it was great to be on it. It really helped me think about a lot of these things and how do we lead our teams to really change the way that we work together and who we see our customer as and our whole role in the organization. I do think it's a very powerful, empowering shift that helps DBAs be even more valuable in the world to shift to DevOps. But it's difficult shifting our perspective. And management needs to really support this by making changes in how teams work together, how teams are measured. And they also need to check in with the staff regularly and see, what is employee satisfaction? What is the level of deployment pain that you are feeling right now? I really thank you to Hamish and William for participating in that panel. It was great. If you want to watch the whole panel discussion, there's a lot more. It's an hour discussion. There's a lot more that we didn't cover in here. You can see that on the Redgate Hub. It is the biggest issues in a DBA's world right now webcast. We have lots of great upcoming free online sessions, and we're at the end of time here, but if folks have questions or comments, if you've had things that you've seen be successful for you or things that you want more info on, feel free to put them into the Q&A pane as well. I can stay a little after and discuss, but upcoming free online sessions, these are just 3 of them. If you go to redgate.com/webinars, it'll take you to a whole page with a list of sessions. On Tuesday, October 23rd, Andrew Pierce will give a session on how to achieve true DevOps by including the database. Then on October 30th, I have a session on the single question to predict success for DevOps and what it means for change control. And in that session, I am going to be highlighting some insights from that webinar that Steve Jones did with Gene Kim. Gene Kim is part of the team at Dora that does the State of Database DevOps report, and also he authored the book Accelerate. That book was written with Jez Humble and Nicole Forsgren, and it's just got amazing insights into what makes teams high performers at DevOps based on years and years of research. So he and Steve had a fantastic discussion. You can watch the whole discussion online. It's at redgate.com/webinars. If you go to the bottom, there are recordings there you can check out. But if you'd like to join me for the highlights, I think there's some really interesting highlights when it comes to change control there. And then on November 15th, I'm really interested to see this webcast that Esteban Garcia from Nebbia Technology is joining us for. It's about enabling business agility through database DevOps there. So I don't see a ton of questions pouring in. I hope you enjoyed this webcast, and I'm looking forward to giving another one soon. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Kendra Little from Redgate, and I'll see you again in another event soon. Bye, folks.